Hello and welcome to the EDHRECast. My name is Joey Schultz and I'm joined, as always, by my fantastic co-hosts. Up first, his dad jokes have split second, so unfortunately I cannot counter them no matter how hard I try. It's Matt Morgan.
Now, Joey, I know you said that if I got you one more stupid gift, you would burn it. So I hope you really like that candle I got you.
All right, listen up, Matt. I'm going to need you to announce that you're moving to combat before you attack me like this.
That's fine. I mean, burn it with fire, bolt the bird, whatever fire puns. I'm really lighting it up this time.
Dang it. See, I can't counter them. They're just too quick. Up next, his dad jokes have protection from Joey, so I can't even block them no matter how hard I try. It's Dana Roach.
I've decided that as of January 1st, I am only going to be watching movies that are 4K and above. It's my New Year's resolution.
Oh!
That joke was a perfect 1080p, Joey.
Matt, I think that Dana's coming for your crown on these dad jokes.
I think that joke put Joey into a sudden shock. And burn spells is what we're running with this episode, folks.
Well done, you guys. Oh, I cherish you guys so much. This is a fun end of the year podcast. Let's get done with the rest of our intros, though. This is the EDHRECast. EDHREC is the best deck building resource on the web for the Commander format, compiling data from deck lists all over the internet to provide helpful recommendations for new Commander decks. And what we like to do on the podcast is give all of that data a little more context. Dana, what is it that we're discussing in this end of the year episode?
We are talking about the 2021 year in review.
That we are. This is going to be a very interesting one. We are releasing this episode on the very final day of 2021, and there's been so much that happened this year, so let's talk about it. The good, the bad, the ugly, the popular, the fun stuff. Let's go through the most impactful cards, the things that we'll remember about Magic for 2021 in the coming years, and the things that had the most splash in EDH. It should be really interesting. Real quick, before we get to our main topic, let's pause to give a huge thank you to Josh Lequai and the whole team at the Command Zone for handling the post-production work on our podcast. And of course, we want to thank our sponsors for the show as well.
Yeah, the EDHRECast is sponsored by Card Kingdom and TCG Player. A New Year's resolution to buy from just them would be the easiest resolution you've ever had to keep.
Wow. Just
go to the card in question on EDHREC, click on the vendor link down below, and that will take you to the appropriate site. Doing so supports both EDHREC and the cast.
And if you prefer to support the show directly, you can do so over at patreon.com/EDHRECast. We have patron tiers all over the place. Whether you want to join the Discord community that we have going on, you can do that. Or if you want to check out all of the historic challenges stats that we've done over the years, we definitely have a tier for that as well. But you can do all of that and more, getting yourself so many perks going into 2022 over at patreon.com/EDHRECast. And we have to give us a very special shout out because this person did go to that very special website. So Jamie Coyle, thank you so much for all of your support. We definitely appreciate you being around going into next year.
Thank you so much, Jamie. We really appreciate the support. It's been a really, really great year. We love all the patrons. Thank you so much, Jamie. Okay, fellas, let's get into it. We're talking about the 2021 year in review. It's going to be weird saying 2022 next year. I'm going to do that thing where I'm filling out paperwork and I write down the wrong year. It's going to happen to me for the next 3 months. But let's address now the year that was. And I guess we'll dive right into it by acknowledging the sets that came out this year, because there were a lot of them and a lot of cards and a lot of legendary creatures. We started off this year with Kaldheim and its associated precons. Then we had Strixhaven, which was a really cool set. And of course, the Commander 2021 precons as well. A bunch of Lorehold and Prismari stuff going on there. That was cool. Modern Horizons 2 came out as well, which had a bunch of really funky things going on. Then there were Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, the D&D set, and again, its associated precons. And we wrapped up the year with Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow, and again, their associated precons. So a bunch of vampires and werewolves and zombies and humans as well. So there was so much going on here. We went on a big, wild tour over the entire set, and I guess we're going to just quickly address there. Matt, here, I heard you laughing as I was trying to just talk about all of the sets that happened this year, because it's been a whole lot. How do you feel about all of the the sets that we visited in this year? Was it a lot to you too?
It was a lot. I know I was kind of laughing at you would name a set and its associated precons, and you would name a set and its precons. But like, I know I was kind of laughing about it now that you think about it, but also like that was kind of one of my highlights. I really liked that they did that. They shifted away from the Planeswalker decks or the dual decks that, as Dana pointed out, nobody really bought. You never really saw them. And so they turned it into a product that people do like. And I don't even buy them half the time, but I do love them. I think they're a great idea. But yeah, it was kind of funny. But yes, overall, a lot of products, like we hit all the mainline stuff, but then there still was like the secret layers and everything else that was going on. There was a definitely, like if you had $1, WotC would find a way to get it off you.
I mean, it is a business that has a design to get the money. Yeah, I feel that, but like I agree with you that the precons thing, like it was a little funny the way I was saying, but like yeah, it is also a highlight. Like you and I have both built stuff from the precons this year, so as tongue in cheek as I think I was being about it, like it is also like I agree, it's definitely a highlight. Dana, how about you?
It's a lot of product, but like, so it's easy to make jokes about how you're burnt out and exhausted by the sheer amount of things coming out. But like, I also remember complaining about how the fall set would come out and they're like, well, I guess we don't get anything new now until January. It wasn't fun waiting like 4 months between things either. We're content creators, like we have to stay abreast of this a little bit, I think. But like, if I wasn't, I would probably really appreciate all the content coming out because it's much easier than to just choose to take a month or two off, not buy a set, whatever. But when you are in the mood to pick something up, there's going to be something new. I think the benefits outweigh the negatives, despite the fact that we do comment regularly on just how exhausting it all kind of is. I still think it's probably a good thing in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, there was certainly a lot, but that does make it a fun to go over here as we're looking back. I guess like for me, like going through all of the sets, I'm like, oh yeah, Kaldheim did happen this year. And actually there were other sets that were like, just reprint only sets that also happened this year, but they didn't have new stuff. So to try and shorten the amount of stuff that we will talk about, I guess we won't address those and we'll just get into the actual stuff that had new cards in it.
Too much pizza is better than not enough pizza. So I think the same kind of applies here.
Is it pepperoni? Is it good pizza?
Yeah, I was going to say, would you rather have a lot of medium pepperoni or medium quality pizza, or would you have like a little bit of some really good pizza?
Well, I mean, I think the quality's been pretty good on product too. Like, I don't think they've been just dashing out things that aren't interesting. I've genuinely enjoyed most of the things that have came out too. So I think that's a fair point, actually. It's been good quality as well.
Yes, yeah. And in fact, let's get into some of the numbers now. I mean, we're the EDHRECast. Let's take a look at the numbers that are on EDHREC for these respective sets. Let's quickly go over the winningest, the biggest of the commanders from each of those respective sets. I say winningest, but I just mean the most popular. What are the ones that stuck out to people? Starting off with Kaldheim, we're seeing that Esika, God of the Tree, the 5-color commander that is most of the time just the prismatic bridge, that one has 3,000 decks to its name right now, and it's cheating a bunch of stuff into play. So there we go with Kaldheim's most popular commander, but that was just the main set, not the precon.
Well, I mean, the Kaldheim precons actually outdid Esika. Lateral Blade of the Elves took a new twist on Elf Tribal and over 4,500 decks, and somehow that happened in less than a year because apparently Kaldheim is almost a year old by now, and that just makes me feel uncomfortable.
Well, and then you move over to Strixhaven, where we have Extus Reek Overlord in over 2,000 decks for a 3-color commander. Things that are 3-color tend to be a little bit less played because it requires a stronger mana base. There's a little bit more asked of you as a deck brewer. Still, people managed to put together 2,000 decks from that 3-color Mardu commander out of a 2-color set. That's pretty impressive.
And we saw a first with the Strixhaven precons. The Commander 2021 set had Osgir the Reconstructor as its most popular commander with 3,200 decks to its name so far. That is not a thing that we've seen before where Boros, or in this case, Lorehold, is the most popular out of a set. That just is very, very rare. So that was certainly a first that we got to see there with Osgir leading the pack among that set.
Yeah, oh, and coming out after that, Modern Horizons 2, my personal highlight of the year. No precons, though, to accompany this set, but that's fine because Chatterfang brought all the Squirrel fans to the yard, and people seem to really be latching onto that. Over 2,600 decks playing Chatterfang at the helm. Lots of Squirrel Tribal, lots of death triggers, a lot of things going on. People really seem to like it.
And then shortly after that, we got Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, which kind of replaced the core set this year. And the Simic Commander Volo Guide to Monsters led the pack there with 1,600 Volo decks showing up in our database. So, hey, a Simic value engine wound up being popular with people. I'm shocked to see that.
It's never happened before.
Well, something that I don't think has necessarily ever happened before was like of the precons, one of them came up with twice as many of those decks, and that's Prosper Tomebound. Like, in this case, with all of the releases going on there, the Rakdos Commander did actually outpace the Simic Commander that was from the main set, although the fact that Prosper came from a precon may have helped it out there. But yeah, over 3,200 decks for Prosper, and this is pretty impressive because we're getting later on in the year, so it hasn't had as much time as some of the other things that we saw earlier in the year, and it's still a really impressive number right there.
Yeah, well, and coming up after that, we had Return to Innistrad, Electric Boogaloo, the Midnight Hunt, which had Tovolar, Dire Overlord. We had that Werewolf Commander that people seemed really excited for. We've been asking for it for a long time now. Finally got it, and the numbers show that people are really attached to it. 2,500 decks for Tovolar already. The set's only been out for a couple months, which also is kind of weird to think about that it's already been a couple months since Midnight Hunt came out.
That was definitely a commander people have been looking for a long time. And people are apparently just always looking to make new Dimir zombie decks because Will Helt the Rot Cleaver, almost 3,000 decks in, 3 months here? And Joey has built, 50 or 60 of those probably.
He's been padding the stats, yeah.
Oh, no, goodness. No, Dimir got a really huge upswing in the final bout of this year because in the next set, Crimson Vow, from the main set, the most popular commander is Toxrill the Corrosive, with so far 1,100 decks to its name. And I'm going to say it. I said it on a previous episode. I personally have no goodwill towards this slug. I don't, this slug is kind of a lot for me, but it is really impressive that we're getting double Dimir in a row. That's certainly something that I don't think we see very often.
Well, and of the precons that came out for the Crimson Vow, Millicent Restless Revenant is the most built so far, with over 800 decks to their name. And that's actually, it's the only commander precon commander that didn't outpace the regular set, which was kind of crazy to think about. Like the precons just hit on all levels, and this is the only one that didn't outbuild the main set counterparts.
But with that said, this is the stuff that we have the least amount of data on so far. So stuff in 2022 could change. Who knows? It's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, that's all kind of a whole lot of numbers. Immediately, it stands out to me that Lathril was kind of the runaway favorite so far. Like, maybe not runaway. I guess like it has 4,500 decks to its name, and that is significantly higher than a lot of the other ones that we've seen. But I don't think that automatically makes it the winner because it has had the most amount of time of the ones we just discussed in order to accrue all of those decks. So let's frame this like it's an award show. Like you guys are nominating for the Academy. Who gets the award for the best of the year? Because Lathril is definitely important. It's already rank 13 in the data out of the most popular commanders of the past 2 years. But I think also we should nominate Prosper Tomebound, which is currently rank 42 and has 3,200 decks to its name. And it, still remains a commonly built commander among the past month and the past 2 week sections on EDHREC. We, of course, have to acknowledge our third nominee, Osgir the Reconstructor, which gave us a new Lorehold identity and is really creative and fun and powerful. And he's been one of the most built commanders of the past month for like every month since his release. He's actually rank 41, one ahead of Prosper. And you know what? Because I'm a necromancer, I'm also going to put Will Helt the Rock Cleaver up there because he shot up to 3,000 decks in only like 3 months. He's currently rank 49. If that pattern continues, his trajectory could potentially send him past Prosper and Osgir, maybe. But I don't know if that trajectory necessarily will continue. Maybe this is just an early burst that will taper off. Hard to say. But yeah, those I think are our 4 nominees: Lathril, Prosper, Osgir, and Will Helt. So Matt, let's send it to you. Who does the Academy Award go to for this year? Which of these is the most 2021-ist commander for you?
So I think Lathril and Will Helt, to use a sports analogy, like they have the best supporting cast. They're in the most powerful colors, arguably. So it's like you kind of expect them to be good. It's like a quarterback for Alabama, who's one of the best teams in the country, won the Heisman this year, but that's because they have the best supporting cast. But you look at who was most impactful, like I think Osgir Reconstructor is the most important, at least, because you look at what they did in Boros colors and to be the most popular commander from that set and very popular altogether, like over 3,000 decks. That is nothing to shake your head at. The fact that it was doing that in Boros colors, like you look at who was the most important, like would Boros have been near successful without Osgir around? I think not. So I'm going to vote for Osgir as being maybe the most important legend this year.
And Dana?
So the one I probably have the most personal experience with is probably the one I will pick here, and that's Prosper Tomebound.
Okay.
And here's the reason. I don't have a Prosper deck, but I have Prosper in a deck, so I've gotten him into play, half a dozen times probably. It's such a like rat in a lab experiment pressing the button to get a little pellet. Like it's just like such a like dopamine hit. Like, I got a card and a treasure. Okay. Can I get a card and a treasure? And if I do, I get a card and a treasure again. It just makes you feel good. It just like is such a little like sneaky fun reward. I like that it makes you feel good. Like it's just a fun card to play, and that's not an experience I've necessarily had with a lot of cards. Like, there are cards you play that are really good. That one is just genuinely like a joy to have out.
All right.
It's just a great little reward engine, a little treat, a little bit of salami for a treat. So I am going to pick Prosper.
Interesting. I don't know where I want to put my vote, but I like the reasons that you guys both have. I feel like Lathril and Wilhelt both have the benefit of having so much, Matt, as you sort of said it, with that supporting cast, that they're kind of set up for success based off of like so much pre-existing history with the game. Mm-hmm. So I might go with Osgir as well. I feel like I will remember Osgir most for 2021, but I also kind of feel like I love the innovation that they did with Rakdos this year too, and that does stand out to me as a really big, impressive trend. So, I'm doing a very pageant answer where I'm saying, both are so good. I'm not really committing. Okay. I'll finally decide. I'm going to pick Osgir. I think that Osgir will be our winningest.
You like me. You really like me.
I would.
Dana gets that reference. I don't think you do, Joey.
I get that.
But a little bit before his time.
Maybe.
Okay, real quick though, like those were certainly, among the most popular ones. Matt, we're getting back. Focus, man. We're getting back to the data. Those were the most popular commanders for sure. But what about just like personal commanders that you guys liked the most from this year? Let's get a bit more like not just the numbers. What were commanders that you really they just resonated with you as a player?
Well, I think mine is. You don't have to question mine. It was Kyler Sigardian Emissary. Just
of course
Selesnya, but. It does everything that like I wanted to do for so long, and it just feeds right into like it has some tribal synergy. It makes really big or makes really small things really big, and you just turn things sideways. Like if you watch twitch.tv/EDHRECast on Wednesday evenings, the very first time I played that deck out of the box, like I was giggling because it did so many just silly things just out of the box. And like I know we've mentioned several times the past couple months, like these precons this year, folks, were just out of this world. They were so good. It was probably one of the best things that Wizards of the Coast has done. But Kyler's precon, I would giggle because I was having so much fun with that.
I love that. Dana?
The one I wound up building was Tavash Gloom Summoner, and he is a ton of fun to actually play. I liked the Dimir Clue Commander, Eloise. Everyone that I saw talking about it when it was Spud was kind of going on about the infinite combo. But like ignoring that, I just think it's a fun commander. Like even if you're not building it that way, I just think like messing around with clues in Dimir, that's just a fun deck to build. So I liked Eloise a lot. And I kind of like the mono red Layla the Blade Reforged, who is the 2/2 with haste. Whenever she attacks, you exile the top card of your library and you can play it this turn. And whenever you exile one or more cards from your library, you put a counter on her. I like that too. Like it's card advantage mono red. It's giving you an excuse to play red's impulse draw stuff. I was looking to build her for a while and wound up going a different direction for a mono red commander, but I still think it's just a lot of fun. And at least when I was playtesting it, I quite enjoyed it as well.
I like those answers a lot. I am gonna, for me though, I adore Guillaume, the master chef, like Mr. Golgari food guy. Like there's no way that can't put a smile on your face. Like that one really tickles me. So I think like when it comes to personal favorites, I also built Karazakar this year, and the goad monstrosities have been so much fun. But in terms of just like commander design, I didn't even build Guillaume, but man, is it really, really fun. So I like seeing those. There've been some really cool creative things going on here, and those are super fun. But Those were just the commanders. Now let's talk about some of the cards that went into the 99, because there were some standouts this year and we got to address them. Let's start off with Kaldheim. Some of the most important cards from Kaldheim that we saw were things like the World Tree, which is currently showing up in 40% of decks that can play it because it's this huge, awesome color fixer for 5-color decks. There was Toski, Bearer of Secrets, which is showing up in over 20,000 decks so far, and Birgi, God of Storytelling, which is also showing up in 20,000 decks so far. And we got to shout out Tybalt's Trickery, which is showing up in 17,000 decks so far. And that's kind of a lot. So Kaldheim had some big standouts, especially some red ones.
Yeah, some really excellent cards there. And things like the World Tree, too. Like, sometimes there are cards that start off successful and then, people maybe lose interest or swap them out with something else. They wind up maybe not being as potent as they look. Something like the World Tree is just going to be a good card in a 5-color deck forever. Like, that card's just always going to be in demand and always going to be really, really useful. So some of these feel like they're like Tybalt's Trickery is probably not the kind of card you're ever going to see replicated. So like, if you want that effect, that's one of the few ways you're going to get it. That card's going to be around a long time impacting games. And none of them necessarily, like World Tree, I guess, would be a staple in 5 colors, but Tybalt's Trickery doesn't feel like the kind of thing you have to run in red. In the past, we've got those Arcane Signets, which is the kind of card that's a great card, but you also feel like, well, it's going to go everywhere. It's just an auto-include, so now it's a 98 card format or whatever it is. Most of these don't feel that way. They just feel like useful cards in the right deck, and I like that. I'm a fan of that.
Well, this was also kind of a big year. Like, we talk about all the big splashy mythics and rares and everything, but there were some uncommons that were still some pretty powerful heaters in themselves too. Stormkiln Artist, that uncommon from Strixhaven, that's in over 21,000 decks already. I said 1,000, like that's so many decks for just an uncommon, but turns out people really like having a bunch of treasures, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you get to make a treasure. Like, that's a very powerful card, and it gets beefed up for all the artifacts. And then another uncommon from Strixhaven, Solve the Equation, where you get to search up your library for an instant or sorcery and put it in your hand. Like, that's just a great tutor for, it's a toolbox type card, and that's in almost 19,000 decks right now too. So 2 uncommons that are getting played in over 10% of their respective decks. Like, that is not insignificant for just regular uncommons that you can find in draft piles.
Yeah, Archaeomancer's Map was a card that kind of came into the format with a lot of hype, because it's one of those few ways for you to maybe kind of ramp in white, or at least get card advantage, or both sometimes. It's kind of shown itself to be legit. It's in 16,000 decks already. I'm running it in multiple white decks, and I'm never unhappy to see it. It really, really performs. I think maybe the downside is I think it performs best in decks that have access to draw already. So you always have lands in your hand for when the time comes that the green player, does something that lets you put your land into play. So maybe that's not perfect. It's not maybe as good in like mono white or Boros as it is in say like, Azorius colors or Orzhov colors or something. But it's still a really, really good card, and his showed up in an appropriate amount of decks, I think.
Well, and Dana, you just mentioned card draw, and the card that I think everyone's going to be talking about as one of the winningest cards, or the 2021-ist cards, is going to be Esper Sentinel, which is one of the instances where we've seen card advantage on a white source. And this one, the data is blowing everything else out of the water right here. 35,000 decks that can play Esper Sentinel are 27% of eligible decks. That is very, very big. Esper Sentinel has made an absolute impact. I will personally say that I have seen it still in some decks where I don't think it necessarily belongs. Like, if you're playing blue, you probably can already draw cards a little bit more reliably, but regardless, like, the energy behind this card, it is definitely a huge favorite. So like, that one has to be acknowledged here.
I think mono white just got a lot of really good tools. Like, we've talked about 2 already. Vanquish the Horde is we'll add it to the trifecta here. But just a very good board wipe. Like, it costs 8 at its face, but it costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield, and then it's just a destroy all creatures type of effect. We all see how powerful Blasphemous Act is. Like, you never pay full price for Blasphemous Act. You're never going to pay full price for Vanquish the Horde either. So having a effectively 2-mana Wrath in most situations, like, that is very powerful in mono white. Those control decks, and obviously not every deck that plays this is mono white, but it's still played in already almost 9,000 decks, and it only has been out for like a month or two. That's a good surge of numbers already. 15% of decks that can play Vanquish the Horde are.
Yeah, That's a great one. And as long as we're talking about Innistrad now, I gotta say, I love the new slow land, dual land cycle from Innistrad, which are all appearing in a quarter to about a third of decks that can play them. And I just really like those. I think that they're really, really cool. I hope that they stay cheap or maybe get reprints and precons or something like that, because they're great for Commander. They come in untapped when you want them to. I really like those. And I like that we got both of them right off the bat, one right after another. We didn't have to wait 5 years for the cycle to complete itself. So that is another really huge standout to me from this year.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun to see them finish the MDFC cycle earlier in the year.
Yeah.
But I kind of wound up replacing those mostly with Innistrad dual lands. I think for they just work better and they're less hassle. It's just like your land is, yes, once in a while it comes into play tapped, but 98% of the time it comes into play untapped and just always makes you both colors. I mean, they're just better. I've been loving seeing them in every deck I've put them into, which is every deck. So, I mean, they're great.
Yeah, I absolutely love the dual land cycle they introduced in the new Innistrad set. They're so good. They are so powerful. And I think a lot of people are going to overlook them because, well, what if I play this on turn 2? Like, okay, but people are already playing the fast lands, the Scars of Mirrodin versions of these, and like they're not. I much prefer the Innistrad version over the Scars of Mirrodin version.
Completely endorse that for sure. And you know what? Real quick, rounding out some other notable standouts from the year in terms of like their popularity and quick adoption, Augur of Autumn and the Meat Hook Massacre definitely deserve to be shouted out here too, because Augur of Autumn is already showing up in 14% of decks that can play it, and the Meat Hook Massacre is showing up in 11% of decks that can play it. And I gotta wager that number would be higher if the card itself hadn't shot up to great henge prices, because I think of the cards from this year, that might be like the most expensive one that we saw this year that would go into the 99 and be like really impactful and popular for Commander. At least of the ones we discussed, it's certainly the most expensive there. That thing is huge. I would certainly be playing it more if I had one, but it's like $50 or $60. Like that one also is a big standout to me from this year. It just, because it's a big standout and it's good in more than just EDH, it's a very, very pricey card.
Yeah, it probably would have been the most played card far and away if it weren't for the fact that like it got really expensive very, very quickly. There was a lot of potential there, but sadly, it turns out when a card is very good in multiple formats worth of players want it, and there's only so many to go around.
There you go. So, okay, let's put this back. And Dana, let's start it off with you. Of those cards for the 99, which one does the award go to for you?
Man, I really want to be a contrarian and say anything that isn't Esper Sentinel.
Okay. But it sounds like you're going to say Esper Sentinel.
I mean, I actually, I still think, I do tend to agree. I still think it's a little bit overblown. I think it's a good card, but I think that people are acting like it was a second coming of, Mystic Remora, and it's not.
Okay.
But it's still very, very good. So I probably would go with Esper Sentinel. I do think the amount of value you get, it's a very strong card that fills a hole better than anything else in this list. Like, Vanquish the Horde is amazing, but like it's not like White didn't have 20 playable board wipes already. Meat Hook Massacre is fantastic, but like there's plenty of things that do something kind of similar in black. There's just not something, or at least not very many things that do what Esper Sentinel does in White. So it's a very strong card that does a thing that color needed very much. So I think that's what I have to go with.
I mean, I always love a good rare land cycle. Mana fixing is one of the big things that people like. I really think that it's the cycle, when you take it all together, it's really hard to outdo that as far as how much of an impact it is going to make on the format.
The Innistrad dual cycle gets it for you then?
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Well, I guess that means that it's my turn to do a pick. And Dana, I can not resist the desire to be contrarian. So while you went with the Esper Sentinel, which I respect, and I am very close to picking myself, I personally want to shout out Tybalt's Trickery. I think that one has actually snuck up on me the most as being like, I really want to put this in more and more decks as time goes on, because red being able to counterspell some stuff has given it, there's more like for lack of a better word, trickery that I can pull off now than I felt I was able to do. And it is one of the things that makes me feel more secure in building red decks. And that is a trend that I noticed in myself this year of actually building more red decks. And cards like Tybalt's Trickery kind of helped lay a foundation of comfort for that for me. So that is one that I felt personally very attached to. But I think that those are all good picks. Like Esper Sentinel, regardless of whatever my personal feelings are here, Esper Sentinel is definitely the card that we will remember from 2021 for sure.
So since we're all picking things, why don't we move the challenge of stats and each individually pick some entries there as well?
Yeah, Dana, why don't we put a damper on Joey's little challenge stats segments? Let's go back since it is the end of the year, last episode of the year. Let's select something that maybe like I don't know, like a challenger submitted, like our favorite over the year. That's a nice little change of pace, something to put a bow on the challenge stats for 2021.
I like that very, very much. Yes, and I understand if you're trying to stop me from being contrarian there, Matt. So thank you.
I just want everybody to get along. Everybody love everybody.
We do. No, I think those are all great picks. Yeah, no, let's do that for challenge the stats this week. Let's, instead of going over, some new ideas here, let's actually look back upon our favorite listener submitted challenges, because that is a really awesome one of the things that we can do in our Discord on the Patreon is that listeners have been able to submit challenges for this segment, and there have been some really good picks. So, Matt, since this was your suggestion, how about we start with you? What was your favorite listener submitted challenge the stats from this year?
So my favorite from this year was Grim Guardian in Arami of the Dead Tide decks. This was our listener. You can find them on Twitter at Sir Charles Gaiman. Grim Guardian is just a card that I've wanted to find a spot for so many times, but I never have been able to. But Grim Guardian, it's 2 and a black for an enchantment creature that's a zombie. It's a 1/4, but it has the Constellation ability of whenever Grim Guardian or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. It's just one of those nice type of a blood artist type of effects where you can ping everybody. It's so good. I love those types of cards. I think Constellation is it's a mechanic that maybe under better circumstances would have been a little more successful, but Grim Guardian it's just a great card. Arami is a great home for it. So Sir Charles Grimm, you get my digital high five for listener challenge of the year.
That is such a cool one to make multiple copies of, and then they each see each other.
Yep.
That's really, really awesome. And hey, by the way, as a reminder to everyone, if you go to patreon.com/EDHRECast, you can see the full spreadsheet of stuff that we've got for the historical challenge of stats. It's really cool. I'm going to jump into my favorite pick from this year, and it comes from our Discord patron JJ Mickey, who had a challenge that I just loved, and that was Augmenter Pugilist, or more specifically Echoing Equation, the flip side of Augmenter Pugilist, which is really cool to turn all of your creatures into one of your creatures. Even if the creature that you choose is legendary, all of the other creatures you control will become non-legendary copies of that creature you have. And JJ Mickey specifically put this one for Kumena, Tyrant of Araska, Merfolk Tribal. So you can turn all of your many, many merfolks into merfolk lords, so that all of the merfolk will then pump each other up for just this huge, enormous hit. I thought this was so cool, and it was one of those cards that really, there's so much going on in Strixhaven, especially with things being double-sided, that I feel like Echoing Equation is one of those flip-side cards that just kind of like passed me by, and ever since this challenge, I've been looking for a home to try and play Echoing Equation, because I think that's a really cool interaction. So that is my favorite from this past year.
Well, my pick is going to be Fanatical Devotion, submitted by Demir Buffalo.
Hey!
Fanatical Devotion is 2 and a white for an enchantment. It just says, sacrifice a creature to regenerate target creature. It's a sack outlet in white on an enchantment, which is probably the hardest card type to remove, and it doesn't cost you anything. Like, the ability to just sacrifice whatever you need without needing to expend mana is really, really useful. You see people frequently running, Ashnod's Altar or something just to have the sack outlet, even if they're not planning on going infinite. And yeah, 2 mana is useful, but there's plenty of times they'll just use the sack outlet to sacrifice stuff to get whatever thing they're trying to accomplish. Fanatical Devotion is just always useful. Like, whenever a creature of yours dies, it lets you generate that or is going to die. Sacrifice it anyway, regenerate something else. Someone goes to board wipe, sacrifice half your board to save half your board. Like, it's a useful spell in general, let alone how useful it is as a sacrifice outlet. and it hasn't been reprinted since that first printing in Nemesis back in 1974. So it's just not showing up in a lot of decks, but it definitely should see more play. I am totally in agreement here with Demir Buffalo. That was a great pick, and I'm a fan of the card completely.
I believe actually that card was actually like the promo card in the book insert for the Outsiders. I think that's how it was. It's kind of like Nalanthi Dragon.
That was our first crossover of theirs. Like if you bought a Led Zeppelin album back in the 70s, you could have a chance to open a copy of Manic Ocean inside.
Oh,
that's how old that
I thought it was a Fish album, but that's my bad.
You guys are so silly. Also, can I just say that I think I'm having a delightful influence on you if Matt's challenge was for an Arelmi Reanimator deck and Dana's challenge was a very aristocracy type of card. Like, I think I'm having a great influence on you both.
That's your Christmas present from us, Joey, letting us think you have an influence on us.
Oh man, Dana, I also need you to announce when you're moving to combat before
right.
Like
I would say I think the thing that is really getting burned among Christmas gifts is Joey with all those Dana comments.
I need some ointment to cover all those burns. All right, let's get back into some more of the reviewing of 2021. We talked about some of the cards that, according to the data, are definite standouts. But like, let's not just ignore, the data, those are really popular. Those are awesome. But again, let's get a little personal with it. What are some of your, let's put it this way, sleeper hits maybe from this year? Matt, let's start it off with you. What is a card that really spoke to you from this year that maybe you hope sees even more popularity in 2022 maybe?
Man, it's really hard to narrow this down. There's so many good cards that just go into 99s and stuff that didn't have space for a lot of it, just because like you only have so many spaces in a deck. And I really like a bunch of the kind of like artifact removal that we got. Ruinous Intrusion is just a really good card for +1/+1 counter decks. I haven't gotten to cast it yet. Like I've really tried so hard. I've put it in 3 decks just because I want to cast it. But it's 3 and a green, and it just exile target artifact or enchantment. You put X +1/+1 counters on a creature you control. X is the mana value of the permanent exile this way. We got a few different cards like that, and they're all super good. They're just those little here and there improvements, kind of like quality of life type cards. We keep getting stuff like that, and I love them, and I just try to find room for them, but I can't because you can only have so many of them. It's like mono blue artifact matters legendary creatures. You only have room for so many of them, so you can't really play them all. So yeah, it stinks. It's like Pest Infestation is another card in this realm. I think it's just in a lot of cases, it's a better Reclamation Sage. But yeah, it's just there's so many good cards like that.
No, I feel that.
You're putting them on the spot here, and it's so hard to say just a couple cards.
I totally feel that. Like, I mean, there's a huge impulse inside of me right now that just wants to talk about Ink Shield for the next 20 minutes because I love it. But I can't call that a sleeper hit because everyone knows how cool Ink Shield is. Like, that one is certainly famous, and I love that one. But yeah, there's so much that I just want to say because there's so much going on here. But I'll give the floor to Dana. Dana, what are some sleeper hits that you would pick from this year? Personal favorites.
The first one will be Rousing Refrain. That was from the Commander 2021 set. It's a sorcery for 3 red, and you add a red mana for each card in target opponent's hand to your mana pool, and you don't lose that mana until end of turn. And then you exile it with 3 time counters on it, so it comes back after 3 turns. But you can also just suspend it for 1 in a red. So if it's the kind of card you happen to have in your opening hand, you drop it on turn 2, and turn 5 rolls around, and essentially you have a turn with probably double mana. And then it gets suspended again, and it can, pop off again a couple turns later and continue that cycle as long as the game lasts. It's just a really good card and has straight up won me games. And I'm a little bit surprised it doesn't see more play. I think it probably needs to be in the right deck, but I've been really happy with it whenever I've drawn it. It's very, very solid. It's maybe not as good as Mana Geyser, but Mana Geyser's insane, and being like, closing in on Mana Geyser is pretty good territory to be in.
Yeah, I could be into that. I also will point out a red card for me. I think Reckless Impulse from, I believe it was from Crimson Vow, 2 mana, red sorcery, exile the top 2 cards of your library, and until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. That is really big. It's just a common, but that feels really huge to me. I really, really like that thing, and I hope that it catches on like wildfire. That feels amazing in red decks, so I want to shut that one out too. And oh goodness, there are so many that I want to talk more about. I don't think Timeless Witness, which is like the 1 more mana version of Eternal Witness, I don't think that one is being played nearly as much as it should be. That's a great uncommon. Another version of Eternal Witness that's really, really good. But easily the sleeper hit that I'm going to pick here is Storm of Souls. Storm of Souls, I heckin' love this card. Like this is, I mean, it's a reanimation card, so okay, big surprise. Joe likes reanimation, but it's a one-sided reanimation effect in white. 6 mana, you get all of your creatures back from the graveyard, except that they're 1/1 flying spirits. And that might sound like a drawback, but it's just not. Like the enter the battlefield effects that this can produce are probably alone enough to be game winning. And white also plays blink, so you can blink those creatures, return them back to the battlefield, and then they'll be themselves again. This, I feel like this one is not getting nearly as much attention as it deserves. It's a reanimation effect that is one-sided, that is very rare. It is very, very good. I love that card.
I mean, if I could shout out one more card that's probably like the most commanderiest of commander cards so far this year, Surge to Victory is the type of card that stories are made out of.
Ooh,
like that card,
yes.
I have never seen it cast and it didn't lead to just something just worth remembering. So Surge to Victory, it's 4 red for a sorcery that says exile target instant or sorcery from your graveyard, and then creatures you control get +X/+O until end of turn, where X is the card's mana value. And then whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player this turn, copy the exiled card. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. The bigger spells you have in the deck, the bigger this gets, and the more value. Like it's
good.
Oh, it's so good. I've seen it copy Seize the Day. I've seen it copy all sorts of just nonsense cards, and it's so much stinking fun. Like I said, I just cannot emphasize enough. Like this card is a story as soon as it resolves. Like you know something is going to happen that you remember.
I've used that one on a Mana Geyser. So like a big board of tokens hit, and then they all got to cast a Mana Geyser, so you end up with 200 mana on your second main phase. Like, ooh, yeah, that's a great pick, Matt. Dana, any other shout-outs that you got to put before we move on?
My last one will be Choose Your Weapon, 2 and a green, and it has a mode that I've never used, which says this spell deals 5 damage to target creature with flying, although that's maybe not awful. The most important mode on it is double target creature's power and toughness until end of turn.
Yeah.
When I first put it in a deck, I just was going to use it as a second worst berserk, I guess. But a couple different times I've caught myself being able to do really useful things with it. One time I was able to keep a creature alive through a toxic deluge,
Nice.
and then kill somebody with that creature because the deluge wiped the board. It was, set to 8 or something, which was supposed to be a full board clear, kept my creature alive, and was able to kill that person with it who thought they were going to survive because of that board wipe. And then one time somebody went to Swords to Plowshares, a large blocker I had in play, to try to alpha strike me. And I choose your weapon to double the creature's power and toughness to gain, instead of gaining 12 life, I gain 24 and put them out of alpha strike range.
Nice.
In addition to the fact that you just kill people with it, but it has some kind of secret utility that maybe you don't realize until it's actually in your hand in a game, which is kind of how it worked out for me. So I've really found myself enjoying that card.
I love these. Oh, there's so much cool stuff. And listeners, I would also love to know what your favorite sleeper hits were from this year. There's so much that we can't address all of them, but there's so many cool, fun things. And Matt, like you said, these are a lot of the cards that we're just getting so many cool stories out of. And I just love that, man. It's a good feel. It's a good feel, bud.
It's good. It's real good. That's why we play the game, for the stories that come out of it.
So on the other tip of this here, what's the biggest disappointments we've had in cards so far, or just in general in Magic and EDH this year?
Monologue tax, full stop. That card can get undesigned. Oh my gosh.
Oh my.
I think it's made 2 treasures ever for me. The cards, everybody was super hyped because it had some very obvious parallels to Smothering Tithe. This card is not Smothering Tithe. This card is not a quarter of the Smothering Tithe. This card has left me so disappointed.
And I don't think we loved it when it was first previewed, and it's been worse than that.
It's been worse than we predicted, and we were not very fond of it. Yes, you are correct.
Yeah, I'm still using it in a token deck because my Thalisse deck will still make spirits if I do get to make treasures off of it. And I'm like, there's synergy that I'm still trying to do, but it has not wowed me necessarily. I like the idea, but it feels weird to me that it doesn't continue to tax someone for each additional spell that they cast that turn. You just tax them for the second spell, but not for the third or the fourth. I'm like, but they're still monologuing. Like the flavor is a disconnect for me there too. So, okay, I understand.
The card's just not good. Like flavor aside, the card's just not good.
Okay. Tell me how you really feel there.
It's not good, Joey.
I love it.
I will tell you
I
how
think
I
he
feel.
told us. I think he shared
It is
that.
not
All
good.
right.
So
well-
Ink Shield is a good card. This is anti-Ink Shield.
I understand.
There we go.
But Ink Shield's a high bar. I got to throw that.
The bar is not low enough. My standards aren't even this low.
I've got a couple of things where I'm just like Cleave, for example, I just think is a very misnamed mechanic. Like the idea is really cool, but like we have a word in the English language for this and it's redact. Like if Cleave had, instead of being called Cleave and it cuts the words out of stuff, if instead it had been named Redact and it was like an Azorius ability, it would be over. Like that would be such good flavor and it would really fit with what the mechanic's trying to do. But I don't know why the mechanic's name belongs more to the plane than to the mechanic itself. I thought that was kind of silly. This is a little bit tangential to EDH, but like the whole double feature debacle it's a debacle is what it is. Like that's kind of a heavy sigh kind of moment for me. And the black and white cards also just really don't do it for me. And we heard a lot from EDHREC users who don't like seeing the black and white cards flooding the pages for EDHREC either, because it makes it very difficult to see on a web page and in my opinion on a battlefield. So I'm also not a fan of that necessarily, but my biggest award for the thing that I think was most flustering for me was just Old Gnawbone. I just don't like Old Gnawbone. I just don't. Old Gnawbone makes me feel the way that Matt feels about Turgid. You know,
Ooh.
No, I'm not even a mono green flying creature that makes artifacts. I don't it does not work. I do not like that, and I don't like that green is moving into the treasure department because it just doesn't feel like it needs it. That is a huge miss for me, and I would love to see movement away from that thing. But then again, me comparing it to Matt's feelings about Turgid might have been a tall thing. So Matt, I'm sure you're going to take the floor again.
Well, yeah, that's a tall order because Turgid is. If I could unmake a card, like I get Monologue Tax was a miss. That happens. But Turgid is a card like I genuinely wish would be unmade. Like the card is a zero, or it's a net negative, I should say, when it comes to the fun scale. I can't politely talk about this card because it just it does so much that's just not fun about the game.
And this all comes with the caveats, of course, of just like playing with what your group loves to do. And these can be a resource race that is certainly enjoyable for a lot of players. But that one is that one has a big onus attached to it that certainly does not jive with the stuff that you're after.
Plus in 2021, where Webcam Commander really, really took off, like we thought 2020 was the year. This past year, Webcam Commander was everywhere. Turgid is unplayable when it comes to Webcam Commander.
I wouldn't say unplayable, but hey,
you better have a lot of Infinitokens, which you can get
there you go
over at Etsy.com.
Infinitokens, absolute savior. You'll see us using plenty of those on our stream, twitch.tv/EDHRECast. Just enormously so useful for the webcam game. So, well, there we go, Matt. We turned the negative energy that we've got about the Turgid and the Gnawbone and forward it towards really positive energy because Infinitokens are just absolutely huge. But we've griped our gripes about those things. Dana, the floor is yours. What do you think was a dud this year?
This is probably a complaint I've had the last couple of years, which is the super strong 5-color commander that doesn't really have any restrictions in terms of being a 5-color commander. You can just play it for a couple mana of any color and have it do really powerful things, which kind of defeats the purpose of a 5-color commander. Cody, in this case, the Vociferous Codex, just a hyper strong 5-color commander that lets you run whatever really good cards you want to run in your deck that are probably better than the person who has access to in their 2-color deck, and you're not really penalized for having to do that because of the way the commander works. So I'm really tired of kind of seeing that design space where they feel like 5-color shouldn't have a downside. I think that was a bit of a dud. I know it's a little bit different of a beast in CEDH. That's a kind of a different game that they're playing there in terms of basically how the game functions. But like in regular Commander, I'm just kind of tired of seeing that kind of design. And we got one more this year in Cody.
No, I feel that with like Kenrith and Najeela, which WotC has been on the record saying, we misfired on Najeela. So I get the pattern there is a little bit like, oh, okay, this again.
The Snarl lands too. There's quite a few land cycles out there. We'd love to see them finished. And on the top 10 list, that land cycle wasn't on it. That was the land cycle. No one was asking for the other half of it, and we got the other half of it. So, I mean,
I don't even know what the Snarl lands were. I missed this memo.
They're not great. It's like a throwback to the cycle originally began with like stuff from like Shadows over Innistrad, and now there's other ones. You have to like reveal a land from your hand for it to be untapped or whatever. And it's just like it's not nearly as cool as even other land cycles that we got this year. So it's nice that the cycle is finished, but there are other cycles that would be cooler to finish first. So I get that, Dana. That makes a lot of sense. And I think also we would regret it if we didn't briefly mention the red-white Audric 2. Brief moment of silence for him. That design really landed with a thud. And you know what? Actually, speaking of lands, I'll also put it out here that WotC has itself acknowledged that like snowlands were not done elegantly in Kaldheim, since they didn't provide an incentive not to run snowlands. So there's like that no reason not to play snowlands. And Wizards of the Coast has also acknowledged this, which was a complaint that I certainly had at the time. When Kaldheim came out too. So I'll also say a little bit of shade at the Snowlands. I think that they did a bit better when it came time for Modern Horizons 2, but at the same time, it's kind of like, that also strikes me as a thing that like, it wasn't as elegant as it could have been done when it happened in the first place this year. So as long as we're talking about lands, that's another one that I'll throw out there too.
Yeah, the Snowland kind of stunk because I think it's led to more Rule Zero conversations than I've ever seen, just because everybody's like, well, I have one card and I don't want to I have one card that cares about Snowlands, I should say, but I really don't want to buy a bunch of Snowlands, so I just want to Rule Zero all my basics. Like, that's happened in so many games, and like we get it. Like, it would have just been nice for, I agree, Joey, a better execution of reintroducing Snowlands would have been nice.
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay, like, that was honestly kind of like cathartic to air a few grievances. But like, again, I think it's important to note that like those things that we perceived as duds or as misfires are like, those are not overshadowing all of the other cool stuff that happened this year. So it was nice to talk about. But I'm again, just still like, the fun moments still like way huge for me when it comes to this year. So I kind of want to use this as an opportunity now, guys, to shift more to a discussion about basically, what do we think about the current state of the format? For instance, this year we saw 2 bans, actually. Hullbreacher was banned in July, Golos was banned in September, and Worldfire was unbanned in September. Do we have thoughts about those bans, if they've affected things? Do we think that there are any other bans or unbans that we would like to see? Or is there something that maybe, not even related to bans, is there something that you think the format needs more of? Or other things that you would like to change or trends that you notice? Dana, let's start it off with you. What are you feeling about the way that EDH is flowing?
I think things are really, really healthy right now. Nothing particularly feels like a problem. I think we are better off with Hullbreacher and Golos gone. I understand that maybe isn't everyone's opinion. Particularly people who had a Golos deck that was real unfortunate having to lose your commander. But I think as a whole, the format is better off without them. Worldfire, I haven't seen anyone play Worldfire, and it's the kind of card where unless you're playing that particular style, you were already running like Jockala Hops or something, or you weren't, and Worldfire didn't inspire you to start playing those kind of cards. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it changed much, but also if that's the case, then I don't know how much unbanning things like that really contributes either. People were talking about unbanning Sway the Stars if Worldfire got unbanned, and it would probably be equally unimpactful. So then why unban it? I don't know. I'm torn about those. I do think there's a couple of those cards that are really specific to a certain play style, and if you aren't playing that style, you're just never going to see them, so they're probably super safe. But I also feel like, well, I don't know, maybe is it even worth the risk then at that point? But other than those kind of fringe questions, I think things are very healthy regarding particularly the ban and unban list right now.
All right. Okay.
I mean, I guess this is a chance then too to kind of take the annual Rules Committee and Commander Advisory Group appreciation comment too, though.
Heck yes.
Despite what some voices out on the interwebs would like to say, I don't think the format has ever been in better hands. I think the Rules Committee continues to do a great job, with very calculated bans and unbans. They're not doing things willy-nilly, despite, again, what voices would like you to say. But the Commander Advisory Group is growing and is becoming very representative of the player base. It's great to see some of the voice that they have there. And not making those decisions, but just influencing, giving feedback to the Rules Committee. I think the format's in a great place because I think the people that are running it are doing a great job. That is to say, like, yeah, the goalless ban, like something's always going to step up. Like Cody vociferous codex, the number shot up as soon as goalless was banned because, like Dana pointed out, I mean, there's always going to be a best thing to be playing, and just Cody was just the next in line. People are going to. I mean, if you want to min-max, people are going to min-max. That's just what happens. But other than that, like, I think if you're a casual player that like casually follows the rules in the game, like, I think that you have to be loving what WotC is doing with a lot of pre-constructed decks. I think there's a lot that's really good. That the pros far outweigh the cons, I should say.
Yeah, a big data point for me is just when we redid the SALT scores this year, which we had a full episode on. It was super fun to look at those. And there were some shifts, but there were not overwhelming shifts. There were a small handful of cards that had gone up like a little bit, but it wasn't like there are some new boogeymen of the format that are absolutely just demolishing everything. Like it very much felt like the more things change, the more they stay the same there. And that felt to me like a good indication of health for the format. I think there's an interesting trend to note in terms of the way that it does feel the game has itself evolved a little bit, especially with all of the new treasure stuff that we've been seeing. Like, I think when people saw the Card Academy manufactor, which can turn any production of a treasure or a clue or a food into the production of all three, and everyone's first impression was like, oh, that's cute. And now we're like realizing that it's just like, that's a really, really good card because look how many treasures the format is making so constantly. Look how many clues we're able to make all the time. And that has caused a few personal shifts in my deck building. Like I'm playing the card Viridian Revel a lot more because when opponents sacrifice all of those artifact tokens that they're making, I will draw cards off of my Viridian Revel. Like there are small things that I'm noticing there that do influence the ways that I'm interacting with the format a little bit. You know, I feel like my Mazarek deck has never been in a better position because there are so many sacrificable artifact tokens out there in the world these days. So that is a shift that I'm noticing, but it's not a shift that I am worried about, is I guess how I should say it.
Yeah, I think it could be potentially problematic down the road if we keep getting that many treasures, but I don't think it's a problem right now for sure.
Yeah. And you know what? There's actually one more thing that I should point out here, too, is that I like seeing the developments that different creators have been doing this year, too, because there's just so much that is making the stuff around the format really good, too. Like I think of the deck building websites Moxfield and Architect, which have just continued to innovate in all of these really, really cool ways. Seriously, they are some of the best places to put your decks online. They're really awesome. We at EDHREC had a big remodeling of the website this year, too, and that has been really, really influential to me in the way that I'm able to interact with the data that's going on here. And then also, like, I want to shout out real quick the I Hit Your Deck channel, which is just really, really awesome for EDH gameplay. I mean, they're just so awesome. But I love that they take a really big, solid chunk of time in their episodes to actually, like, depict the pregame discussions that they have, which takes like several minutes. And I think that's kind of like a risky play when an audience is really hungry to like, just get to the EDH, let's see the gameplay. But like, it's important to take time for those things and to remind us that a 5-minute conversation before a game is really important to make sure that the next hour-long game is fun for everyone. And I love how normalized that's been. And so I also really love seeing the ways that the pregame discussions have continued to evolve and grow more complex. And they aren't just bound to like a 1 to 10 scale. They are actually a lot more involved between everyone at the table. And I think that's really good too. I just want to shout out that the other creators in this Magic universe are also just doing aces for work. Yeah,
modeling that behavior in that setting. Like I agree. The I Hate You Deck folks, they're doing a very, very good job of just here's how an example on how to have like a very constructive Rule Zero conversation that's going to benefit everybody. We're taking a couple minutes now to make sure that the next hour is as much fun as possible. I think that's something that a lot of folks could be paying a little more attention to because I think everybody can improve on how they communicate about their own decks.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of that's what it's always about, right? Is the room for improvement, including for self-improvement. That's what this game can teach us about. It's so cool. And I guess that leaves me with just a final question for you guys. Just one more thing. You know, we've talked about the year in review, 2021, but hey, Matt, what is something that you would like to see in 2022?
In 2022 or 2022?
In 2022 also.
Oh, as well. I know over the past probably month or so, I've just not shut up about the pre-constructed decks that come with every set. Just continuing that trend. I think that has been one of the coolest things because they're finding a chance to introduce cool and interesting new legendary creatures, but not stuff that maybe would break standard a little bit or just not do well in standard. So they're playing around with that. The reprint outlets that they're introducing also are doing a great job. That's probably my favorite thing about 2021, and I would like to see that continued in 2022 as well.
I love that. You did refer to 2021 as the year of the pre-con at one point in our show. And I think that's a great thing to remember, and hopefully to like continue to see how that evolves. But yeah, they managed to make a lot of self-contained and powerful pre-constructed decks that still felt niche and didn't feel like you have to get these staples and stuff. So like that's a really good point.
Yeah, they just make the game so accessible to newer players, and I think the game is it can be very, very overwhelming. So making things as accessible as possible, I am all on board with.
All right. And so Dana, now we turn it to you. What's something you want to see in 2022 too?
I think in 2021 we saw WotC do a nice job with what felt like intentionally going out of their way to make interesting commanders in color pairs that maybe had a lack of them. I think we saw that in Boros. I think we definitely saw it in Dimir and Rakdos, where there felt like there was an attempt to give us things that we hadn't traditionally seen in that color pair that were interesting and fun to play. And I hope that continues moving forward. They keep looking at those color pairs and saying, okay, all of these, say, Simic commanders tend to be based around just a value engine. Let's make an attempt to put a few different Simic commanders out there. Like, I hope we see more of what feels like targeted attempts to provide things that are lacking in those color pairs in terms of interesting commanders.
Yeah, no, that is something I mentioned earlier, that I've been building red more frequently this year, and I think that's directly influenced by exactly what you were just saying there. Especially when it came to the Rakdos stuff for me, I was just like, oh, there's a whole bunch going on in Rakdos that I'm really, I'm tickled by that. That is a great note. Specifically, I think that Azorius might be the next place to look into. We've got a lot of flying matters and control stuff, but maybe in 2022 we'll see more Azorius stuff that is expanding into more of those exciting realms that we got to see with the way that they handled Dimir and Rakdos, as you noted. I love that. I love that point a whole lot. For me, it comes to the mana rocks. It really does. More Cursed Mirrors, more Crowded Crypts. The 3 mana rocks, even the ones that have colors in their mana costs that can do funky, weird stuff. I am loving any reason to not play a bunch of efficient 2 mana rocks. A reason to not immediately go for the Arcane Signets and to opt for other things instead. I would love that because it can help us play with the pace at which we're playing and get more of those late game punchy stuff. So I want more Crowded Crypts. That's such a good mana rock. I love that so much. So that's I think where my brain goes. That's what I want to see in 2022. A whole bunch of those. Yeah,
continuing I think basically a little bit of what we're saying here is we'd like to see them continue some of the trends that they've been perhaps doing already. We talked about really liking the fact that we got a good land cycle in both the Innistrad sets that we all liked quite a bit. If they keep doing that, keep finishing off the land cycles that exist that are popular already but are missing either an allied or a enemy half. I'd like to see a lot more of that down the road for sure.
Yeah, that's a great thing. And that's also something that Matt had mentioned too at the precons, is that like we are seeing these trends and we hope that these good trends continue because it's flown really well. This has been a delight of a year, all things considered, even with the unprecedented times that we are still in. There have been some really joyous moments from 2021. So it was really cool to go over and see those. What were the 2021ist cards? And then what might we see in 2022? It's going to be really exciting. Listeners, we would also love to know what you are most excited for in the coming year for Commander. And where do you think that EDH is at? What do you think is going on with the format? How do you think it's flowing? Do you think that it's good? Are there changes that you would like to see as well? This has been one wild year and there's been just really cool standouts. So I'm excited to see the development, and this is a really fun way to end the year looking over all of the stuff that we've gotten so far. So with that, guys, how about we call this episode and 2021 to a close? Fellas, if our listeners would like to get in touch with us, where is it that they can find us all?
So you can find me on the Twitters at Mathimus55. That's MATHIMUS55. And don't forget, Wednesday evenings going into 2022 as well. We will still be streaming Wednesday evenings over at twitch.tv/EDHRECast. So make sure you tune in for all of those games in the coming year as well.
And you can find me on the Twitter birds at Dana Roach. I'm writing articles for both EDHREC and for Commander's Herald. You can hear me on my other podcast, CMDR Central, and you can find all of us together at patreon.com/EDHRECast.
And I'm Joey Schultz. You can find me at Joseph M. Schultz on Twitter, and you can find the cast at EDHRECast on both Facebook and on Twitter. Plus, if you've got a question for us, you can contact us at edhrecast@gmail.com. Our thanks go out once again to Josh LeQuai and the whole team at the Command Zone for handling the post-production work on the podcast. And we want to thank our sponsors, TCG Player and CardKingdom.com. And you can visit altersleeves.com/EDHRECast for cool custom EDHREC sleeves. Listeners, please remember that Black lives still matter, Black trans lives still matter, and we will be back at you next year with more data and insights for you. But until then, remember, EDHREC your deck before you wreck your deck.